Hi guys, welcome back to Foliage Loft. My name is Liam, and today we're going to talk about some substitutions for traditional soil mixtures that are going to be better for your plants and for the environment. Let's get right into it. So I have a feeling that if you're into growing houseplants, you're probably the kind of person that cares deeply about nature and about the environment, and you might be looking for ways to reduce your overall carbon footprint. If so, this video is going to be perfect for you. I'm going to give you some more environmentally friendly options to consider for your soil mixture. So first, I'm going to go over some of the components in the soil that are not so good for the environment and some alternatives which are better for the environment. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to show you how to create a good general houseplant soil mixture out of the good components. And I think in creating your own soil mixture, it's going to be less expensive for you in the long run, and it's also going to be better for the planet. The most common ingredient in your off-the-shelf soil mixture, and especially if you're buying from a big box store, is going to be some form of peat moss. And if you purchase a plant from a nursery, it's probably going to come in some kind of peat moss mixture. But if I could have you take just one piece of information from this video, is that peat moss is terrible for the environment. And when I say it's terrible, I just mean that it's terrible for humans to remove peat moss from its natural environment. When the peat moss is left in the ground where it belongs, it's actually incredibly beneficial to the environment and to the global climate. But first, let me back up and just explain this a little bit. I suppose a good place to start is to ask the question, where does peat moss come from? Peat moss is most commonly found in peatlands, which are a type of wetlands that can be found all over the earth. This kind of environment actually covers a vast amount of area, about 3% of the land surface of Earth. Peatlands are constantly waterlogged, so think of something like a swamp or a bog, and all of this water sitting around makes it so that plant decomposition slows way down, and all this dead and decaying plant matter eventually all get bound together and compressed to form peat. And it takes thousands of years for this process to naturally occur, and eventually the peat moss can be meters thick. Now, the important thing in regards to the climate here is that these peatlands that are full of this peat moss are an excellent natural carbon store. So all that carbon that is stored inside the plants will be trapped in this peat in the ground and won't be released back into the air as a greenhouse gas. But this is where us pesky humans come into play. We come along and dig up the peat moss out of these areas, and in digging up the peat moss, we release massive amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which have an effect on raising the temperature and messing with the climate. In fact, greenhouse gas emissions from damaged peatlands cause about 5% of all man-made carbon emissions, which I think is a pretty massive percentage when we think of all the other things us humans do to pollute. Digging into these peatlands can also cause massive wildfires as well. In fact, some peat bog fires in Indonesia back in 2015 emitted more carbon emissions than the entire US economy each day. And when we go in and disturb these environments, we will also often damage and destroy the natural habitat in our wake, meaning that the local wildlife and plant life can no longer survive there or are severely threatened. One of our closest relatives in the genetic tree of life, the orangutan, has had its population drop over 60% in the last 60 years, and this is mostly attributed directly to the loss of its peat swamp habitat. But the orangutan is just one species out of thousands that are affected by peatland destruction. So for many years, gardeners and plant hobbyists alike have been using peat moss as the basis for most of their soil mixtures, and I think it's still the most common growing medium. But I do think more and more of us are becoming aware of this problem and are starting to use some alternatives to peat moss. So there is something that's a renewable resource and it's a little bit more sustainable in its production, and that's cocoa coir. And cocoa coir is also known as coconut husk. It's that kind of outer shell of the coconut that we throw away after we eat it. Now, cocoa coir isn't perfect for the environment. I mean, it does use some energy and resources in processing it, and it also gets shipped around the world, so there is definitely an impact that it has, but I think it's much better for the environment than harvesting peat moss. So you can actually reuse cocoa coir over and over again many times and keep its beneficial properties intact. And obviously, it can just take a few months to grow some coconuts to produce this cocoa coir, while it can take thousands of years for that peat moss to naturally form. And a lot of houseplant pests actually prefer living in peat moss than coco coir, so if you do make the switch over to coco coir, you may see a reduction in the amount of pests in your houseplants. Another great thing about coco coir is that it's pH neutral, and it also shares that great ability of water retention that peat moss has as well. So all in all, it's quite similar to traditional peat moss soil, but it has a few extra benefits that's going to be better for your plants and for the planet. Now, if you do want to use coco coir as part of your soil mixture, you're going to have to keep in mind that it's quite low in nutrients just by itself. So you're going to have to either fertilize frequently, or you're going to have to add something else into the mix to provide that fertilization for your plants. In this mix, we're using worm castings, which is going to slowly release nutrients that your plants need. Worm castings are a great way to improve your plant's root structure and will also promote growth with new foliage. And they also have beneficial microorganisms that will help your houseplants as well. So who knew worm poo was so awesome? Did I really just say that on the internet? Anyways, we're going to allocate 15% of our mixture to worm castings. You can see just how rich this stuff looks. This is going to be incredible for our plants, and it'll slowly feed them for months to come. Now, we also want to add something into our soil to improve the aeration and improve water drainage in our mixture. And since your plant's roots definitely want some access to oxygen under the soil, you don't want to have too much water inside the soil at any given time. And this part of the mix is going to help with that. Most soil mixtures are going to use perlite for this component, but in our environmentally friendly soil mixture, we're actually going to use pumice instead. Now, both of these products are produced by volcanoes, but there is a slight difference between the two. Perlite is volcanic glass that is then collected and can be heated in super hot ovens to a very high temperature. These small particles will then puff up and expand in size when heated, and they're going to improve aeration within your soil mixture and make for a better draining soil. Pumice is very similar and provides the same function for your soil, but the heating and expansion of this volcanic rock happens naturally when both water and gas escape from a volcano. So we're using pumice in our mix because it will typically have a lower carbon footprint than perlite. Perlite needs additional processing by humans, which requires energy and resources. And perlite also has this issue of being just so light that it will rise up to the top of your mixture. It will leave the soil and kind of come up to the surface on you. Whereas pumice has a little bit more weight to it, and it's going to stay within the soil where you really want it to be. Now, pumice is a little bit more expensive than perlite, so you gotta watch out for that, but I think it's totally worth the extra expense. You will definitely need to adjust the ratio of pumice that you use in your mixture depending on the type of plant that you have. In the general purpose mix we're going for today though, we're going to keep our pumice ratio at 1/4 or 25% of the total mix. And just as another small addition to improve the aeration and draining of our soil mixture, we're going to use some orchid mix or orchid bark. This is going to give some chunkiness to the mix, and we're going to put in 1/10 or 10% of our mix to orchid bark. And this natural and organic product is also going to provide a small amount of nutrients and some charcoal, which is going to support the roots of your plants. And this part of the mixture definitely is not necessary. If you want to skip using orchid bark and you just want to add some more pumice, you can do that too. And obviously, once you have all your components in a container, you can just simply mix them all together with a trowel, or if you're like me and you enjoy feeling the dirt under your fingernails, just use your hands, and then you're ready to use it to pot some plants. So I'm actually a little bit behind myself on repotting this year. I do have quite a few more plants to repot, but I have repotted a few of them into this soil mixture, so we're going to see how that goes, and I'll keep you guys updated. So I hope this gives you guys a good starting point for a soil mixture to play around with that's just a little bit more sustainable. And just to go over the ratios one more time for you, we're going to go with 50% coconut coir, 25% pumice, 15% worm castings, and 10% orchid bark. So I think that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys found it informative and entertaining. If you did, please make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I really enjoyed taking my drone and my camera outdoors to get some of the footage for this video, so I hope you guys enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed filming it. Thank you guys so much for watching. See ya!